it actually taxes you less the more you have. A sales tax is the following. It's the tax you pay if you buy a shirt in a store. You pay the same tax on that shirt as does the Rockefeller family. And unless you're unusual, you have less than they do. You earn less than they do, which means that if both of you are paying the same amount, it's a smaller share of their high income than it is of yours. It is the opposite of a progressive tax. That is the second largest source of revenue to the state of New York. So the two big ones, the two monsters, are taxes on the mass of people. The one slightly progressive, the other one massively regressive. If you put the two together, we don't discriminate according to ability to pay at all, because the discrimination of the progressive is offset by the opposite of the regressive. Now we come to the tax on corporations. A small, distant third. Let me make this real clear. Corporations pay a small portion. I then did a little research. That's what us professors are supposed to do. So once every 4 years, I take an entire day out and I do research. I looked at how the three sources of revenue in New York changed over the last decade, first decade of the 21st century. And here's what I discovered. The broad-based income tax rose by 50%. And the regressive tax rose by 24%. And the corporate tax rose by 20%. Let me do that again. We don't charge our corporations at all. They get a free ride in this state. I then did...
Wait, say that again? You said rose by 20%?
Yes, the broad-based income tax rose by 50%, the regressive taxes rose by 24%, and the corporate tax rose by 20% over the last 10 years.
The rate or the gross receipts?
The gross receipts. Gross receipts. I wanted a total figure that took into account rise and fall of number of firms, rise and fall of population, all of this. But it's important because that's where the state gets its revenue. So it got more out of the mass of people, a system that isn't progressive at all. Much more out of them than it took out of the corporate sector. By the way, this is a 10-year period in which corporations, particularly in New York, did fantastically well. Boasting extraordinarily well. What's the point of this? The answer is, what are we talking about? There's no money. Where in the world would it have become possible for us to there's no money? Of course there's money. Of course there's money. There's the money of those who haven't been taxed. My research ended with the following thrilling experiment. I asked, suppose the corporations had to increase their contribution to New York at the same percentage that the people who pay income and those kinds of taxes did, and I discovered it would have been many millions of dollars into the coffers of the state of New York that it now would have available to avoid the disasters. And that doesn't even ask the question, gee, maybe the corporations should have been asked to pay more. Or maybe the progressive income tax wouldn't have had a top rate, I think it's 7%, but might have had a top rate of, I don't know, daring 10% instead of 10%. You put those together, there is no shortage of money. The language of we don't have enough should be rewritten, to be honest, to be saying the following. We don't have enough money given that we cannot tax the mass of people beyond what they already pay, and we politically can't dare to go after the rich or the corporations. Let me show you how that's built into our system, because that's not new. You all know it's been true for a long time. How has that worked? In our culture, it works as follows. The mass of people push, especially in the old days when they had organizations, like the unions and the Socialist Party, and so on. They push for public services, public schools, public health, social work institutions, mental health facilities, police, fire, the whole apparatus. Wow, that costs a lot of money. So the government, faced with a demand of people for services, goes to those people and says, okay, well, we have to tax you to pay for the services. Ooh, the mass of people, they want the services, they don't want to pay the taxes. Now let's go to the other two groups. Corporations and rich people. Same problem. They want services from the government to support their businesses, to support their initiatives, to give them a subsidy for training workers, to provide police protection in the nice parts of town, to make sure that the garbage is cleaned up nicer there than in those other parts of town. And then the government goes to the corporations and the rich and it says, hey, I pay for this. Ooh. So our politics has the following economics associated. The three groups all want more from the government and they don't want to pay for it. Now, perfectly reasonable in our individualist society. Everybody is getting his. A footnote for those of you that study economics. I feel a need to talk to you for a moment because I have a sense of wanting to give you my condolences for doing this. I've done it all my life. In economics, we celebrate the great founder of our discipline because his great achievement, he was, by the way, a deeply religious man. He was a professor of religious studies at Glasgow University in Scotland. Deeply religious man, whose name many of you know, Adam Smith. And he really, you got to hand it to him. He came up with the following idea, that if each of us goes out there and pushes hard for our immediate personal interest, what's good for me, screw everybody else. This, which might appear to be a recipe for disaster, won't be. Because, without our being aware of it, leading us by the hand as we go and secure our own personal interests is God. Stop, don't laugh. It's unrespectful. God. God will lead it such that, here comes a really good part. You can see why the founder of a discipline, this is exciting. It will be such that if each of us only looks for our own interest, God will make it turn out that the outcome for all of us is the best it could ever possibly be. We get the best for the community by never giving a flying for the community.
So Jesus was bad.
What?
So Jesus was bad.
No. Yeah. Jesus, I think, fell out of the picture, as he has for many people in the religious tradition. But for Adam Smith, he was daring, and he was a religious man, so he wanted to make the point. Each of us looking to secure our own self-interest will be led, and here comes a famous line, as if by an invisible hand to producing the best for the community. Hint, the invisible hand, God. This is a wonderful idea. You don't have to worry about the community at all. Just worry about yourself, it'll work out. And the big guy, he'll make sure there's nothing for you to worry about. If every part of the community pushes to get the maximum services from the government, while paying the least, because that's what's in my self-interest, I want to get the most from the government and give them the least, it'll all work out. Well, how has it in fact worked out? Well, it's put politicians, hint in American history, in a very difficult spot. How the hell are they supposed to run a government if the mass of people want everything and want to pay for nothing? The tour, right? This is a moment to feel for your local politician. With all the jokes we make, not a fun job. But our politicians have proven adequate to the task. They found a way to handle this. How do you give the mass of people a lot of services without making them pay for them? And can give the corporations and the rich people a lot of services without having to tax them. The solution: borrow the money. Very important. Borrow the money. It's a think. You think our politicians are stupid? Smart folks. How we pay for the services we give to everybody without taxing them? Borrow it. To the mass of people, they don't understand. They're just getting the services. They don't have to pay the taxes. I'm happy. I can go to the public beach. I have my kid in the public school. I get someone to help me when when I have a crisis in my family, and I don't have to pay taxes. That's what I want to know. I studied Adam Smith. I know. I'll get the best for me. It'll work out for everybody. And the corporations and the rich, they're even smarter. They say, "Good, I don't want to pay taxes, so I don't." But the government has to raise the money. Where's the government going to borrow the money from? Here comes the good part. It borrows it from the rich people and the corporations, who lend to the government the money that the government didn't tax from them. So for them, they exchange taxes, which would have been money gone, for government bonds. They give the money to the government, which if it was a tax would be end of story. But no, not at all. They give it to the government. The government provides for them, pays them back the money with interest. At this point, I would make my second break for the national anthem. Because you really have to take off your hat to a system that works like this. So for most of the last half century, all government has borrowed its way to kingdom come. Every city, every state, and the federal government awash in vast amounts of debt, because it is the principled solution of a political system in a capitalist economy that works like ours. It is another stunning example of capitalist efficiency in action. And you know something? It works. It works for long periods of time. It works. The mass of people are happy they're getting services and not being taxed to death. The corporations and the rich people are even happier. They're not having to pay taxes. Instead, they've got a really good investment. To make it even sweeter, for those of you not familiar with it, to make it even sweeter for rich people and the corporations, we passed a law many years ago in the United States that has the following provision. When you lend money to any city in the United States, or to any of the 50 states, the interest you get from that loan is completely income tax free. When you work, any of you, on Saturday, and you get your $18 an hour for cleaning somebody's garage, you pay a tax. But for Mr. and Mrs. Well-Heeled, who lend to Oswego for its sewer system, the money they get in interest pays zero income tax. Nothing. There are people in the United States who have invested $1 million in lending to cities and towns. They earn whatever it is, 50 grand a year, interest. The federal government takes nothing, not a penny of income. There's no tax to be paid. So for them, not only do they not get taxed, but they get a chance to lend the government a sum of money, the interest on which is a tax-free income for them. If time permitted, again, the national anthem. So of course, all the cities and towns have borrowed. It staves off what? It staves off the contradiction that comes out of a system